Welcome to Teaching Artist Podcast, a show dedicated to discussions of teaching art to kids, making art, and how those things overlap and feed each other. I'm Rebecca Potts, your host, a visual arts teaching artist. Hi, thank you so much for listening. It means so much to me that you are tuning in and taking in these stories of teaching artists. If you would like to join me in community, come to the Art Educators Lounge. This is a monthly Zoom meeting that I facilitate with Victoria J. Fry of Visionary Art Collective. It's always on the last Saturday of the month at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern, and whatever time that means for you. So bring your coffee if you're over here on the West Coast with me, or bring a little snack maybe if you're joining us more at lunchtime. This month, we are hosting artist talks from 5 artists in our community. I am so excited to hear about their work and offer feedback and encouragement on their talks. We had a free submission process to present, and we do plan to facilitate this type of meeting again. So if you are interested in presenting your work through an artist talk, but you missed the call this time, you can keep an eye out for the next round. And if you join our mailing list or follow us on Instagram at Teaching Artist Podcast, that's a great way to stay in the loop. You can also follow at Play Inspire Gallery on Instagram, which is our relatively new gallery account. I hesitated for a while in making a separate account for the gallery, mainly because I just didn't want to be managing more social media pages. But we did it, and we've begun hosting studio visits in connection with our current show titled Rise over there. So I'm grateful for your follows and for helping us spread the word. If you haven't checked out the exhibit yet, you can visit playinspiregallery.com to see it. Okay, let's get on with the episode. Each week, I'm sharing a featured artist as well as a guest interview. I'll share a bit about the featured artist here, as well as sharing images of their work on Instagram and on the website. This week's featured artist is Marianne Worrell. She's an artist and educator who employs diverse disciplines, subject matter, and tactics in devising works that can generate different kinds of knowledge of landscape, our place in it, and our responsibility to the growing need for reform. Her work explores the interactive potential of art as a research tool and its capacity for social and environmental change. Worrell creates installations, sculpture, and mixed media artworks. She investigates the dynamics of the plight of food resources, including manipulations by large corporations and governments, climate change, and personal responsibilities, and details the limitations of these resources in a multi-layered system, which may involve the viewer to explore the subject in a physical manner. And she says about the work that we're showing, which is her newest work, after collecting plastic waste for over a year, I have begun to build wearable sculptures which speak to the outrage of plastics filling our oceans and landfills. After many years, these plastics are breaking down into microparticles. These particles are now being found in our fish, water, sea salt, poultry, etc. We haven't learned what the effects of ingesting microplastics might be. This series focuses on the negative impact of one-use plastics. And she is donating 15% of any sales of prints to the Ocean Conservancy, working to save the world's oceans. So we will be sharing Marianne's work on social media and on our blog at teachingartistpodcast.com. This work is so powerful and her topic is so important. Go check it out. And if you would like to be featured, you can submit your work at teachingartistpodcast.com/opportunities. This week's episode is with Jill Forie. Jill talked about how she started and runs her custom sneaker business, Sink or Swim Kicks, alongside her teaching. She shared tips and encouragement for teaching on a cart and really advocating for yourself. Jill also talked about anti-racist pedagogy and the importance of acknowledging her whiteness and both recognizing and celebrating the cultural differences present in her classroom. I loved the idea of realizing how many micro decisions we make as artists during the creative process, but also how those begin as more macro decisions that become intuitive through repetition. Jill Forie is a Los Angeles-based artist and teacher and a proud native New Yorker. Jill is the sole, pun slightly intended, owner and operator of her custom footwear business, Sink or Swim Kicks, which she founded as an art ed student in 2009. Sink or Swim has opened many opportunities for Jill, including magazine interviews, TV appearances, celebrity clients, and more, but she always identifies as an educator first and a working artist second. She has been an art educator for 10 years and has a strong passion for providing equitable art education to her students. Jill finds that the arts can be the great equalizer in schools and aims to challenge traditional approaches to art education. Her aim is to mobilize art both literally and figuratively into all spaces. Through her work, not only as an artist, but as a business owner and educator, she aims to inspire her students to follow their own path and acknowledges the power of representation and celebrates the story of every student who enters her class. Let's hear from Jill. So I am here with Jill Forie, and I am excited to hear about your teaching, art making, and the business that you run. Maybe we could start with just a little bit of background. So I always like to ask, how did you become both a teacher and an artist?
Awesome. Well, good morning. I'm really excited. I'm excited to talk to you about this because, we're always talking with kids, which I love doing, but it's nice to talk about your life as an artist outside of that realm. So this is really cool. Oh man, my origin story. I was like, oh.
Right.
It's funny because the teaching and the business started pretty much at the exact same time. Completely unintentionally, right? So I was in college and I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I was just, a friend of mine whose mom is an art teacher had suggested me going into art education. And I was just like, yeah, maybe. It wasn't this calling passion for me, which I was proven that it should have been all along. But, I went into the art ed program in 2009. I was halfway through college and then it just clicked. And then at the same time, being a college student, I was like, this is a lot of work, but I also need to make money. And at that point, I was just kind of doodling on sneakers and doodling on stuff on my own clothing, just, us artist types. So it's just draw on stuff. And then, so my business is I paint and sell custom sneakers. And then that's kind of where it started, was in college on my own stuff. And then I made a pair of shoes for myself. And then a friend would ask, and then I'd make a pair for them. And then it kind of just snowballed into a business. And I was like, this is 2009. So I made a MySpace page and I love it. I was like, let's see what happens with this. And it's kind of been sustaining itself ever since. So that's been a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and so then you finished the art ed program and started teaching and kept making the custom sneakers.
Yeah, I joke that the custom sneakers have gotten me every job I've ever had. Just because it's funny how, a lot of, I don't want to say this for every teacher. Art teachers are probably an exception because we do make a lot of work. But there's a lot of teachers who don't necessarily practice what they preach in a way. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean, teaching is a lot, right? It's a huge undertaking and you lose the time to kind of focus on your own work. So I've always made sure to make that a priority as well. And, when you're in college, you're making a ton of work. It's a part of the curriculum. And when I finished the art ed program, I got hired right away. I was 22 years old and teaching high school. So I still think that was wild. But it was so much fun and it was such an amazing opportunity. And I just decided to bring the sneakers and my knowledge of that into the classroom with me. And And that kind of like hooks kids, right? Like, so like everybody wears shoes. Everybody has some sort of fashion sense, regardless of what your aesthetic is. You have a certain taste in something. And yeah, it's been kind of coexisting together the entire time. And it was totally unintentional, right? So like, it's weird how things kind of work out that way.
Yeah. So do you have students also like design sneakers in class?
Yeah, I've done it.
Yeah.
I've gotten less ambitious, I would say, over the years, just because it's a trial and error thing. So like, kids want to do it. And of course, well, actually, the first thing they say is, "Can you paint a pair of shoes for me?" And I'm like, so, and I tell them, I'm like, one, I want you to do it, right? The point is that I'm here to teach you how to do something. And they're like, well, we'll look as good. And it's like, that's the point though, right? Like, I mean, I didn't start out knowing what I was doing. And then that's the whole kind of foundations of art education to begin with, right? Like, make mistakes, make a bunch of terrible, terrible work. Like, I have paintings of mine from when I first started painting in general, besides obviously as a kid, but like, when I first started learning how to paint, and I keep them because I love them. They're awful. They're so bad. But like, it's so nice to like witness growth as an artist. I think my kids, like, they don't agree with me at first at all. But then once they see it, and like, I kind of embed that in the year for them to watch themselves grow, it's like, it's really, really rewarding. So when it comes to like shoes, I'm like, hey, if you want to work together after school and bring in a pair, because I'm not going to have 30 kids bring in some stinky pairs of shoes, because they're not all going to go out. They're never going to go out and buy new ones. So like, if you want, like, we've done it with like an art club type of thing. We've done it like digitally, where we do like mock-up drawings, and then sometimes they go home and they actually do it themselves. And I have two students they're not even students, they're like in their 20s now, from when I first started teaching, who do it as well. Like, they custom paint sneakers, and they're like in this little world with me now. So it's cool.
Oh, that's really cool to see that, like, kind of come full circle like that.
For sure. Oh. Yeah, and I'm like, you guys are better than me at this point.
Oh, and I love also what you said about, making mistakes and growing, and the resistance to that. Like, that's the hard part when you're making something and you have this vision in your head, like, I want it to be this, and you're just not there yet. It's not going to be what you want it to be. That's so hard. Like, I can totally see that resistance.
For sure. And like, I mean, that's still how I am as an artist. Like, people are always like,
right,
like, how do you do this? Like, don't you get nervous? And I'm like, oh yeah, I will have a subject in front of me. I'll have all the materials ready to go. And then I have this moment where I'm like, how the heck am I going to do this? And then, but that's the thing is, as an artist, instead of not doing it or overthinking it, I'm like, just throw yourself into it, and then you'll figure it out along the way, right? Like, things are definitely going to go wrong. 99% of the time, it doesn't turn out how it was in my head, but it still turns out in a way that I'm okay with, or I'm proud of, right?
Right.
My favorite thing about art making is all those like micro decisions throughout that you're not even actually conscious of. I like took the time to notice it one day, and I was like, this is crazy. Like, I'm like, I would wonder like what like a brain scan looks like.
Ooh, that would be so interesting. I wonder if there's been that study.
Yeah, I've seen it with musicians. And there's this one crazy, this is like totally off topic, but there's this one video I watched of this woman who was getting brain surgery, but she was playing, I think it was a violin, and she was like, she didn't want that part of her brain to be affected by the surgery.
Wow.
It was like lighting up while she was playing. It's crazy. I was like, it has to happen during art making too.
Yeah. And I love thinking about that, like you're saying, those micro decisions that maybe when we were young, when we were just learning, those were all macro decisions. Those were big things we had to choose. And now, it slowly becomes like, oh, I just, intuitively kind of know which colors are going to look good together, and, whatever, all these little things.
For sure. And that's why I think I teach little ones now. So I'm with kindergartners through 8th graders. And with the little guys, I'm like, just go, like, right. Like, obviously it's structured, but it's very rooted in play and experiment. And, my budget is limited and I don't have a room. So like, play definitely has parameters, and experiments definitely have like certain limits on them, but I still want them to have that space to just like, like, what happens when I mix all the colors together? Oh, I'm not going to do that again. Cause I don't,
Right.
cause then they get upset. They're like, this is not how I look. And I was like, well, I'll guide them, of course. I don't want it to be like a total free for all, but I'd rather them feel like, yeah, cause then it's that macro decision becomes micro eventually. It's this intuitive, like, oh wait, I already know what's going to happen if I try this.
And it's so different to tell them like, it's not going to be a rainbow, it's going to end up brown, than for them to see that this is, oh yeah, this is what happens.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure we've all witnessed it where there's, a wall of these beautiful rainbows. And then there's the two that are like this muddy, whatever. But then I'm still like, that one's going up too. Like,
Yep.
yeah, you figured something out there.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Like, this is evidence of learning, evidence of, figuring out a process.
For sure. I just like it's always rooted in this something my dad had told me when I was younger, when I was like trying to figure out what I was doing with my life. And he was just like, you are always so focused on making sure you're having fun. And I feel like you need to have, and not in like a misguided type of way, just in like the joy in like everything has to be rooted in like fun and like, but like also getting things done. And I was just like, that's how I always bring my lessons in, is like, okay, we're going to learn something, but also like, how are we going to have a good time with this?
Yeah. And that's so important now, especially.
Yeah, definitely now, more than ever. I have to remind myself of that. Jeez.
Yeah. Because you're also in LA, where we've been on lockdown now for about a year.
Yeah.
Have you been teaching online, teaching remotely this entire time? I know some districts have gone partially back, sort of hybrid style.
Yeah, we've fully virtual since last March. Yeah, I've hit the year mark since I've been at the school just to like grab things. Like my calendar still says March 2020 on it. Like,
wow.
But we've been fully virtual the whole time. And this has shifted my teaching practice and my reflection, like deep reflection as a teacher, like as a whole. I mean, how can it not, right? Like given the circumstances, virtual is, I was so resistant to it at first. I mean, obviously what choice did I have? But I was very like, really upset about it, right? Like not necessarily in the way that like, I totally understand why we're doing it. I'm not going to not do it, but it was so heartbreaking because my teaching is so rooted in relationships and like the physical being and the physical art making. So I was just like, okay, how do I still be that teacher from afar, from a screen? And I was like really like, kind of beating myself up about it because I just didn't feel, for the first time in 10 years of teaching, I was like, oh my God, am I good enough at this? Like, can I do this? Like, I mean, it was a very bizarre thing because like anybody who knows me, especially in the teaching world, is like, I love what I do. I'm really sure of it. And this was the first time where I was just like, oh, like, I don't know. I hope I can, deliver for these kids. And,
I think that was a collective, uh-oh.
Oh, absolutely. And like, that's the beautiful thing has been like connecting with teachers, like even in platforms like this, like outside of my own school, because, you can get into your bubble of like what your school does. Like every school is so different. And like, I mean, I'm really, really blessed with where I work, but I'd love to hear what like other art teachers are doing, especially because we're like the misunderstood group as it is in schools. So then you add this platform to it and you're just like, oh my God, nobody understands.
Yeah. And so how did you kind of figure out, or have you figured anything out in this year? What has worked? What has not worked?
I'm a very like on the seat of my pants type of teacher, like which obviously there's an argument against that, but that's just my style, is like, let's figure it out in the moment or just a couple of days beforehand. I just like to kind of cater to whatever the situation is and like adapt to it. I definitely have not figured it out. But I have felt better about it as a part of like growth mindset, right? Like I feel like I'm serving the kids as best as I'm able to in a way that works for them as well. And I've just been like connecting with other teachers a lot more, like, and not even just art teachers, right? I like just been, really diving into these Facebook groups, or there's these Instagram celebrity type teachers, and just kind of like, and not even focusing on like the big following types, like just looking at what other people are doing out there and realizing, like there is this collective, like we need to uplift each other because no one knows what's going on. So like it kind of like levels the playing field, which is nice. Not that there's a competition. Yeah, having that collective empathy is really important. And on top of that, I've been working on national boards for the last 2 years or last year. So that has been this added like, Oh my God. There's just this endless wait.
And that must be really tricky now too. I know I don't know if there still is, like a sort of video component where you're supposed to be like filming yourself teach. So how does that work
Yeah.
virtually?
I'll let you know because it's due in May and I have not taken the video yet. Um,
Oh,
because what happened with that was actually I was supposed to submit that last spring, and literally the day I was supposed to take the video, like something happened with the class that I was working with, and I was like, okay, we'll do it next week. What happened? The world shut down.
right.
So I didn't even have this video. You have to have two. So luckily when COVID hit, national boards was like, okay, we're gonna like level with you guys. Like we understand that this is a crazy situation. They've been really adaptable, luckily, and like extending deadlines and like giving you like a year to defer if you need to. So with this component, yeah, so now you have to record it with your kids virtually. And that is so intimidating to me because like I said, I was like, oh, the video is going to be the easiest part. I'll shine with like relationship building and like all the like the way that we do things in the classroom. And now it's like, okay, I have to switch this small group thing and Google Meet and get this going and like make sure this kid is with you. And I'm like, oh God. But you know what? I feel like this is the way that teaching is going in general. There's this much more technology rooted part of teaching that I think is going to stick, not necessarily full time virtual. So I'm like, I got to get on board with this anyway. So much to my dismay, I will adapt.
Yeah, I know I have struggled a lot too with, like, I had kind of just made the shift towards TAB, teaching for artistic behavior, towards more choice, towards having the classroom really be a studio with centers set up all around, and just like materials available. So making that shift to, okay, there's no studio, there's no materials. I don't want to like dictate all your choices, but I don't know how to do this.
Yeah, it's really difficult. And I think this is the one time that I have been grateful for my art on a cart experience. Granted, I'm not at work right now, but like I've noticed that a lot of schools have done this overhaul of like not having an art room, and a lot of teachers have been forced out of their rooms and to do art for sanitary reasons or whatever, whatever the school needs. And I was like, I've been witnessing people who went from like the studio practice in these beautiful rooms to like on a cart, and they're like, how do I do this? And that's when I was able to come in and be like, here's some practices, here's some things that you can do for on a cart. Because when you hear that, when you get hired and you're like, oh, by the way, you don't have a classroom, you're going to be art on a cart, which the phrase makes me like eye twitch because it sounds bad, but like, it's really like, you can make it awesome if you're willing to. And like, I like having those limitations within my teaching. I like knowing like, okay, I don't have this, so I have to make this happen, right? Like because of whatever obstacle, if you will, is in my way. So like, that's just like my teaching style is like, we only have this much money for this, and then it's not going to be in a room, and we're still going to make it happen because we're going to come up with all these creative ways. And I think that is also part of the art ed experience, right? Like, you have to, art making in general, like sometimes you don't have this material or this space to use. So like, and you still want to make something, you better still make it because that's going to serve your soul. That's going to help, still get you where you want to go.
Yeah. And it's all about creative problem solving.
There it is. That's what I was looking for.
Yes.
Crazy, that's a beautiful thing.
Yes, totally. And I would love to hear, especially for any listeners who are teaching from a cart, what are some of your tips?
It's not that bad. It's funny. So not only I'm on a cart, but I'm also between two different buildings. So luckily I don't wheel the thing up the hill every day. When I was actually in school, I have two carts. One thing is advocating for yourself is the biggest thing. As an art teacher, everyone always assumes that you just like kind of have it covered. You're kind of like the lone wolf. Like you have your other electives or specials teachers that you kind of meet with. But even when you meet like content wise, you don't really relate, or you can just kind of like vent, but like there's no crossover really. So the biggest thing is rooted in like relationship building with classroom teachers, because you don't have to be everybody's best friend, of course, but like you have to have this mutual understanding and respect of like, even though I'm entering your quote unquote room from this time to this time, like during that time, it's my room. Right. Like, and not in like, I'm going to mess up your stuff. And like, but like, please make sure you have this designated space for me to store some work, even if it is like the smallest part of a bookshelf that you can just leave things. Please understand, like, this stack of paintings is drying. I'm going to be back in. It's drying when those kids are out of the room during lunch. I'll be back in later. I'll stack them up. I'll get them out of your way. But right now they're going to be in the way. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like, there is this mutual respect that definitely has to happen with classroom teachers. I've been extremely fortunate in the sense that, like, one thing we say as a staff is always assume best intentions, and which is very hard to do, I'm sure, across schools. Like I said, I'm really blessed with where I am. So that's always has never really been a problem of like people being like, oh, the art teacher came in and ruined my room. Have I done it? Absolutely. Things have spilled, things have happened, but it's still just this best intention of like, no, she knows that like this is going to get taken care of. The kids know that it's going to get taken care of as well. Like they have to also have ownership over that. So like I treat it for that 55 minutes, like that's my room. The same way I would want somebody to do that for me. Like if I had an art room still, which I had back in the day, like, treat, just mutual respect.
Yeah.
And then also you can really make a sink out of anything.
Totally.
I have this bucket system with it's so sad, but like I've gotten so used to it. I even gotten offered to use like this room with the sink temporarily, like it was like a multi-purpose room. I'm like, no, my bucket system works. It's cool. Like just like you can fill up a bucket, you have a bunch of like pre-wet paper towels for hand washing, and you just make it work. And kids, if you implement good systems, you'll be okay. A lot of practice, 1,000 repetitions.
Yeah, and then like adjusting as you go.
Oh yeah, there's been a lot of trial and error for sure. Yeah, and I think it's like the kids are on board if you're on board. If you're willing to make mistakes in front of them, they'll be like, I think kids love it when you make mistakes. Like, and I don't mean that in like a ha gotcha type of way, but they're like, you look up at your teachers, like they know everything, right? And then I remember going into an education program and being like, oh my God, most of my teachers probably taught themselves the lesson like 2 years before they actually knew it. And like, we're all thinking these people are so brilliant, like which educators are to an extent, obviously, but we're also humans, right? Like we got to figure things out. So I like showing the messy side of things to the kids as well. Like just full honesty, full transparency.
Yeah, there's something beautiful about that. So I had 2 schools, and one had a beautiful classroom and one was on a cart. And I feel like, the on a cart, there was also something really exciting about you're coming down the hall and the kids can maybe like hear the cart a little bit, or they like peek out the window, like they know that you're coming, and there's that excitement kind of building. And then it's like, are the art teachers here?
Oh yeah. Getting that cart, it's like, you almost feel like a celebrity sometimes.
Right.
Like,
totally.
Like I stand like wave like Miss America, like hello. It's nice though, because like I feel like it's a collective across any school, any grade level. Like there is such an appreciation for the art teacher, right? Like not to put us on a pedestal, but like we're usually the popular in the schools amongst the kids go. Like, and it feels nice because it's like, you don't necessarily, I think obviously you absolutely need it in schools, but people who make legislation and people who are, in the corporate end of education don't necessarily think it's a necessity. And it's like, if they could just witness what it does for a child's even social emotional needs, forget like learning the foundations and becoming the next famous artist. Like that is so, for me, beneath the surface as far as like needs go. But like if you watch how that supports a child's growth as a person, it wouldn't be a question whether it should be in schools or not across the board.
Right. Absolutely. And just all, like we were talking about earlier, the creative problem solving as well. Like
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's so much.
So much the critical thinking skills, the higher level questioning, like all of it. It's so embedded in it. But like my root of my teaching priorities is always just how do I make them feel like more of who they are, right? Not necessarily who I want them to be or anything like that, but just like the overall social emotional needs is always at the forefront for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess along those lines, like thinking about, the protests that happen, George Floyd's murder, all of the things that happened this year to kind of push this idea of anti-racist pedagogy into like more into the mainstream. How do you approach all of that, especially with the younger grades? What's been your take on kind of sharing current events or even just developing an anti-racist classroom?
I love that because that's been a priority of mine always. right?
Mm-hmm.
I've worked in a lot of different demographics in my, when I started, even I was pretty outspoken. Political art in general is one of my favorite types of art, and artists are always rooted in political movements for sure. And I think, there's no question. There's no like, oh, I'm bringing my politics into school. I'm forcing my opinion on these kids. Absolutely not. This is just a fact, right? There is no political movement that has ever happened that did not have art at the forefront, right? Whether it's signs, whether it's propaganda, whatever, it's there, whether you want it to be or not. And, I've been in schools where there's definitely a lot more privilege and people are like, yo, stay in your lane. Like, don't bring this stuff up. And then you have parents who will come up for you. I've gone to bat with parents about certain things, and I explain my side. And then my school that I'm at now, it's amazing because we have obviously anti-racist pedagogy is embedded, but we have an ethnic studies pillar, or it's a part of our mission statement, is to be agents of social change and critical thinkers. And, when I read that when I first got hired, I was like, yes, I found my place, right? Which is challenging and interesting. It has challenged me as a person a lot because it is a 100% Latino school and I'm white. So it's, which I acknowledge right off the bat. And, I teach Latinx artists, I teach Black artists, I teach, across the board or just movements and styles as well. So I kind of like run the gamut. But I also think it's really important to go into my space and acknowledge my whiteness right off the bat. To name because I remember I had a kid who came up to me, I think it was like the third or fourth week of school. And she was like, hey, miss, I really appreciate you being here. She was an 8th grader. This girl's awesome. I love her. I still talk to her. It was a couple of years ago. And she was like, I got to be honest with you. I didn't trust you at first. And I'm like, that's fine. I'm not going to get offended by that. I was like, why? What's that rooted in? Right. And she was just like, straight up, because you're white. And I was like, I completely understand that. And, that could hurt some people. That could be a lot of questioning for some people. But for me, it was like, how do I continue to build this trust and know these kids are safe in my hands and we can understand each other, right? We can learn on a human level while also still acknowledging color, because I think it's important to know that there's a beauty in the difference and there's a lot of cultural differences, but we can still kind of work together. I compare it to if we're going to go with an art comparison, like a mosaic, right? Like we have all these different pieces. They're not going to fit together perfectly, but at the end of the day, we're going to create something out of it, right? There's going to be a message. There's going to be an image. There's going to be a purpose, as opposed to the whole melting pot type of mentality of we're all here for the same reason and we're all the same and blah, 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 blah. There's equity and there's equality.
Right.
We're going for equity here. And, my community where I work has a lot of need. And there's a lot of, I don't want to say lack of resources or underserved, because I think that term is overused for communities of color, because there's a system in place that made it that way.
Right.
So, I think it's important, like I said, to acknowledge that and make sure that they have access the same way other kids have access. And it goes to what I was saying before about just adaptability, right? Just because we have these roadblocks in place doesn't mean I'm going to deny you that access. We're going to have to work a little harder. We're going to have to get a little bit more creative. But if you want to go to this museum and we don't have a bus for it, but you want to go see this, we are going to figure this out. We're going to do something about it, right? I'm not going to just say oh, we don't have the money. Sorry, right?
Right.
Whatever, material wise, so that's been it's a hugely important part. And then like I said, with ethnic studies across our organization, I work at a charter, is embedded in everybody's curriculum. And I've been working on the task force, if you will, on how to do that and how to work with teachers on how to embed ethnic studies within their curriculum, even if it's math, humanities, art, even PE. We want to make sure that it's there, not in a forced way, just in a acknowledging all humans, because we know that we have a very colonized education system, and we want to just make sure it's culturally sensitive, culturally relevant, and everybody can be served, right? Because it's gone on for far too long. Because I know my education system, the education that I was brought up in, served me as a white student in a privileged neighborhood. But the more I learned, the more I was like, wait a second, that's not real. That's not how that happened. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's those neighborhoods as well that so desperately need to be decolonized, to be, we need, us, the white people, need to learn more about people that are not just like us.
Exactly. And I say that too, My kids are like, they're dope. They can talk about so many different issues on so many different platforms. And like, but then, they're also within their own bubble, right? They're in their own communities. And, we have a lot of work to do as far as, certain quote unquote taboo subjects go. And I also think about, like the communities that I grew up in or the school that I had first worked in. And I'm like, oh my God, I wonder what the response would be if I was having this conversation with that group of kids.
Right.
And I'm hoping that other teachers are doing that in those types of areas. I know it's not easy, especially with parents. Like, and I'm hoping, and I want to know where it's happening because, like I said, I've joined these Facebook groups, and obviously since George Floyd, where there was this uproar of, anti-racist pedagogy, like becoming like a huge thing in everybody's mouth. Like that wasn't a term that most people were using, even though it had existed. And I'm like, and there was a lot of backlash against it. Like, I'll keep it out of schools or whatever. And I'm like, I don't understand that. I truly don't. It makes me so sad because I'm just like, you're doing a disservice to children. I'm not saying like bring in your political views and like push that on them. But like when it comes to just human kindness and human understanding and equity, like why wouldn't you want that in your classroom?
Right, exactly. And that's not it should not be a political thing. Like if you think it's a political thing, then maybe, there's something wrong with whatever politics you're following.
And like even like the mask thing. Like I saw something online the other day that somebody posted. Cassie Stevens did like one of those surprise like mask selfie drawings, and she puts everything up. So somebody had used it, and like parents were like flipping out at this art teacher for doing this like masked selfie drawing because saying it was political and all this other thing. And I'm like, what? Because you're making sure your kid's not getting sick. Like it has nothing to do with politics.
Yeah, I feel like it's easy, especially here in California, to kind of be in a little bubble around that.
Yeah, and I'm also cognizant of that. Like I can rant until the cows come home, but like my beliefs aren't really being challenged either. So I love getting into dialogue with people who don't necessarily agree with me because I'm like, help me understand because I don't understand what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah, that's so tricky. Yeah, I have heard from some teachers who are, not here in California, who are in sort of a more conservative place, more rural, and are really struggling with these things. Like, saying, I want to do better, but I'm scared. I'm going to get backlash not only from parents, but from my admin. Like, what do I do?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because we've been talking about that as a staff recently, and like how comfortable are you talking about race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, like any of those subjects that normally some people are like, yeah, let's talk about it in the classroom, and then some people are like, oh, how do I do this? I want to, I don't know how to, and it's like, how do we get to the root of that, right? Like we're all ready to talk to kids, but it's like, well, what about teachers? We have all these PDs that usually are totally useless. Like, let's put a PD on that, like, right? Like,
right.
Because that could benefit any content area. I feel like we need like a workshop that like goes around and like talks to talks to teachers about how to be comfortable with this types of stuff. But it's, it's hard. Being a teacher it's hard enough. We have enough on our plates.
Yeah, there's a lot. I don't know if you've been following Adding Voices. That was started by another teacher here in LA. She started with a conference, but now they have a monthly newsletter sharing more curriculum, like lesson plans and ideas about adding voices. So, diversifying your curriculum. But I think the plan is to have another conference. And I think they just maybe recently shared that they're going to do a sort of mini version, like a symposium in the summer. So sort of alternating years with a bigger conference, but which is exactly that. It's like PD for art teachers around these issues.
Amazing. See, there's always a teacher out there who's already
figured it out. Who's like done it.
Yeah, and you're just like, damn it, I was going to be me, but also, yeah, I love that you did that. That's cool. I'll definitely check it out.
Yeah, they're amazing. It's Flavia Zuniga West and now Sydney Snyder. So 2 other art teachers that are both here in LA.
Awesome.
Hey listeners, I'm jumping in here because I have an ask of you. If you are enjoying the show, I would so appreciate your support. I'm humbled and grateful for all the interest in this show over the past several months and for the messages I've received letting me know that this podcast has resonated with you. It has been so inspiring to hear from you. Thank you. This podcast does take time, effort, and resources to share with you every week. And I plan to keep it going and stay focused on highlighting and inspiring artists who teach, while also continuing to grow this community and dreaming up additional ways to help you. One way to accomplish this is through direct listener support. Your support would really help the show and community grow. So I've set up a link where you can quickly and easily support the show. The whole thing will take less than 60 seconds. It's at anchor.fm/teachingartistpodcast/support. You can contribute $1, $5, or $10 per month. If Teaching Artists Podcast is a part of your week and you love what we're doing, please consider visiting anchor.fm/teachingartistpodcast/support, or just clicking the link in the show notes and supporting us in any way that you can today. And I had one question that came up for me earlier that I wrote down, was that transition, because you were at high school and then shifted to the younger grades. What was that like for you?
There's so much similarity. It's hilarious. No, it was, well, when I was teaching high school, I also was teaching one first grade class. Our teacher schedules, they always are just like, take this as well, so we don't have to hire someone else. So I had experience with the little guys, but I was really blessed in my high school experience. I taught advanced high school. Mm-hmm. So it was the kids that have like really strategically gotten themselves there. So it was such like an amazing first 3 years of my teaching, just because it was super chill. It was like, it was almost like I was just continuing into my college life, right? I was only 22. Most of these guys were 17, 18 years old. So it was just this very ideal situation with the high school kids. But little guys are the best. They're the funniest people in the world. And I missed that. But, I was teaching in New York at the time, because that's where I'm from. And then I moved to California. And I was living in Orange County, and it was pretty much impossible to get a job because it's like Long Island in New York, where it's once people are there, they don't leave, right? So it's and then I moved up to LA and got this, I just grabbed the first job that I could. And, they had said it was kindergarten through 8th grade. And I was like, I haven't done full time with little ones. And I was like, I'll probably just stay there for a year. LA wasn't my first choice. I wanted to just check it out. And then that was 4 years ago, because I just fell so in love with the kids and the community and the transition, the difference. I say I do miss working with older ones sometimes, just because I like really getting deep, and I like talking about things with them, and really, kind of bringing out that, that critical thinking. But you can still do it with the younger ones too. It's just, you have to be a little bit more strategic and change your language, but it's all still possible. My curriculum hasn't really changed that much. And the way I go about things, I definitely don't baby them at all. We have fun. It's not a strict environment at all, but I definitely don't do the cutesy stuff, which is fine for some people, which is totally cool for some teaching. But that's just not my style as a person. So I'm not going to fake it for the kids.
Yeah.
Right? So much fun. I'm goofy and silly, but they're, it's just a different style.
Yeah. I think that's important too. Just to be yourself, be authentic.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also, there's this art teacher, cliche, the rainbow explosion art teacher, which I'm that. I'm half that, right? I have that side of me, which I totally appreciate, and the colorful and the funny outfits and the silliness, which I love doing. But then there's also the person that wants to get down to business, right? We're gonna have fun. We're also gonna I have a high expectation for sure. So there's this juxtaposition of both worlds.
Yeah. And then how does your art making, you talked about how you bring the sneakers in when you're teaching, like that sort of your sink or swim kicks comes into your teaching a bit. Do you also make paintings or make other forms of art?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish more. I'm sure that you share that all the time, and I'm sure you can empathize.
Oh, yeah.
The sneakers always takes precedent just because I'm rarely just making a pair of shoes just to make them. It's usually to fulfill an order. So there's a time limit, right? Like I don't want to keep anybody waiting for too long. So that is the main priority. I will take breaks from it though, because, sink or swim is not my day job, right? It's not my, where my livelihood comes from financially. So I can take breaks. I can pick projects as I go. And then when I take those breaks is when I usually do some more like independent projects, right? So like I'll do some paintings, and it's usually something that will pop into my head, and if it's gnawing at me, I have to do it right there and then. Like I'm not like this. I don't keep a sketchbook. It's been a really long time since I have. I tell myself every year I will do it, and it just doesn't happen. So then, yeah, it's usually like, and especially with the pandemic, it's like, oh, I have this extra couple hours, and this idea was in my head. Let me paint it out. I recently did, my most recent painting that I did was a self-portrait. I had not done a self-portrait since college. And that was like really, really therapeutic to do and just kind of like dive into that style, because I was like, I don't even know if I can do this, right? Like my painting style has changed so much. The way I look at myself has changed so much. Like, let's see what happens. And it ended up being this like really cathartic experience where I was like, oh, I forgot what it's like to just to paint.
Yes.
Because it usually is so rooted in a purpose for students, for something for work, or for fulfilling a shoe order. So the pandemic in that sense was a blessing, because I've just been able to make art for the sake of making art, which I'm sure we all get lost in after a while. So that's been really fun.
Sometimes that leads to other things within your art practice.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like just getting something out, and almost, I mean, I see it almost similarly to what we were talking about before, where you make a bunch of work and some of it is just crap, but it's good just to get out those ideas. And some of them might be gorgeous and amazing, but then they also kind of lead you on to the next thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's also always a learning process for me. And I talk a big game, because I'm always like, I want to try this style and I want to try this style, because I'm very rooted in my own style is very like portrait based, realism based. And I'm like, I want to try something abstract, or I want to do these different styles. And I just never do it, because then I become the student all of a sudden in my head. I'm like, oh, I'm going to mess this up. I can't do this. I can't do this. And then, what's stopping me from playing? Like, why? I'm telling the kids to do it. And then I'll almost put myself in that position where I'm like, let's just, Jill, pretend you're a 9-year-old right now. Because, 9-year-old is when it's like that doubt, that self-doubt starts coming in developmentally. So I'm like, just pretend you're in 4th grade and just go for it. And 90% of the time I'll throw it out, but I'm like, hey, at least I tried.
Yeah, it's so hard to take your own advice sometimes.
Oh God, yeah, it's a lifelong struggle.
Thinking about your artwork and your shoes. So I'm curious, with the shoe business, maybe if you could get into more of like the nitty gritty, like where do you find clients? How do you sort of sell the shoes and run the business for people who are interested in getting into that?
Cool. It's funny. It's a huge world now. It's such like an oversaturated market just for shoe customizing in general. Like custom shoes is huge. And I love that it has gone on the rise, because I've watched it kind of from a distance, right? I'm not a sneakerhead. I'm not necessarily in the world. I'm in that world for the artistry of it. So I have met these incredibly talented customizers over the years who do all different sort of things. And we have this like collective friendship for like these people who have done it for longer, because it is such a common thing now. But yeah, so I don't make the shoe, obviously. I get it. Most of the shoes that I'm making are from Vans, because they just offer they're lower in price. The canvas is perfect to paint on. It's like ready to go. I've done all sorts of shoes, from boots to Nikes, all sorts of materials, but canvas is always just like, that's the niche that I've stayed in. And as far as clients go, I still don't really understand how this happens, because I don't look for people. It's the beauty. Social media, as we know, is a blessing and a curse. It's become this giant Goliath of a beast. in the last, even in the just last 3 or 4 years. Everything comes from there, right? So like I said before, I started on a MySpace page, and people just shoot me messages, and then transferred over to Instagram, and it's been kind of, that's been the main platform ever since. It's just kind of using the free advertising and using the word of mouth, which has been the biggest thing, and just kind of like contacting people. Well, I don't really contact people anymore, but like I used to like reach out to friends who were like in bands, for example. Like most of my social life is rooted in music, and be like, oh, you're about to go on tour. Let me make this pair of shoes for you. No cost, no worries. Like, and then they're going all over the country. So they're this walking advertisement.
Right.
That was kind of where I started because I was still in school. I still wanted to kind of grow this. And then from there, it has totally sustained itself via social media. Like I'll just get messages on Instagram, just use, like when you make a post, you're strategic using like hashtags or whatever. I am the worst when it comes to this stuff. Like it is just, I've been very, very blessed in that. But like there is definitely a science to it that I wish I had the focus and the patience for. So yeah, that's where clients come from, is always just through social media. I've never had a website as many times as I've attempted to do it. It just has never happened. So yeah, I've really relied on just using those free resources.
Yeah.
Just putting yourself out there, like, and also just making friends with people in different avenues and venues of like, oh, we can collaborate on this, right? Because it's like, yes, I have this ability to paint, but I'm not painting it in a traditional format. So like bridging the gap of like sneakerhead streetwear culture life and that world, and then also bringing it into the fine art world and bringing it into the music world. And it's mobile, literally, in so many different arenas. So it kind of just sustains itself in that way.
Yeah. And I love how, just looking through the shoes that you've done, how there's such a variety between this sort of more portraiture, more like pop culture, and then just like beautiful. I mean, the ones that I gravitate towards are like the flowers and succulents, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty.
It's funny because so many people are like, oh, well, which ones do you paint for yourself? Which ones are yours? And I'm like, I don't make them for myself, just because I'm like, I would never be able to like pick what I would want on a pair of shoes. It's funny because I'm like, I'm covered in tattoos. Like I have put more thought into what I'm painting on a pair of shoes or what I'm painting on a wall than I do on what's like literally permanent on my body. I don't know. It's this weird decision-making process. I think it's because I'm drawing it. So like I'm putting so much stock into like what I'm creating, as opposed to like, I'm getting tattooed or something, like someone else is doing it and I just trust them. It's funny how you can't really always trust yourself.
Yeah, there's another hard one.
But I do have shoes for myself. Like I'll wear them to work every so often. Like if we have like a theme going on, I'll make a pair, and like, just because the kids love it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And do you ever deal with like creative block with this? Or is it, I guess, especially if you're sort of filling an order, it's maybe easier to not get stuck like that?
Yeah, that's the thing. A lot of the time clients are, I tell them, I'm like, you can just give me a general theme and I can run with it, or you can be as specific as you want. And some people are vague, and some people are like, I want this 2 inches above this, and it has to be this exact color, and yada, yada. And like those I don't like because it don't have as much creative spin on it. But also like, that's the gig. Like I'm filling your custom order. So like, if anything, I crave the freedom to kind of get that block. I kind of enjoy that block because I'm like, ooh, this means it's on me. Right?
Yeah.
So like, I like to kind of make those decisions and get around those hurdles of like, oh, I absolutely will hit it. Like where I'm like, whew, I don't know what to do with this. But then I go through this problem solving, and like a lot of the work that like you've seen is rooted in pop culture. So like I'll watch the movie that the person wants represented, or I'll listen to the music, or I'll do that side research to kind of like put myself into the fandom that maybe that they see that I might not necessarily get. Or when it comes to like my own stuff, that's where like the creative block happens, right? Like I said, like that's kind of why but I know I should keep a sketchbook, because I'll think of ideas and then I'll completely forget about them. The closest thing I have to a sketchbook is on my phone. I have these notes that like seem like a crazy person wrote them. This thing hit me, and I just like kind of thumbnailed, like noted it really quickly, and then I'll go back to it and I'm like, what does that even mean?
Right. Especially if it's sort of a visual thing that you're trying to describe in a note app.
Exactly. It seems like a mad scientist wrote it or something.
Totally. And how do you kind of fit it all in? Like, what does a week look like for you?
I will preface that I do not have children. So
Mhm.
I give all the credit in the world to parents out there who are working artists and teachers, or all of the above, or even just one of those things,
Mm.
because I finish my work day and like I have my dog who's the closest thing to a child, and I'm like, I don't even want to look at you right now. Like I don't want to take care of I don't want to take care of anybody right
Oh.
now. So that I will name that I have the time mainly because it's just me, right? So
Mhm.
I make the time. And that's something that I would like to think I'll do if I eventually kind of grow a family. But yeah, it's really because I'm at the leisure of my own. I'm my own worst enemy, and I'm my own best friend in the sense of
Uh,
making time for work. But one thing
mhm.
I will always preface with is like, and I've gotten heat for this in the past because people are like, oh, how do you make the time for this? And I'm like, because of work. Like, let's say we're not virtual, right? Because virtual setting is totally different. Like my work day ends at 4 o'clock. Work is
Mhm.
staying there. Work is 4 o'clock and I'm going home. Like, occasionally, of
Yeah.
course, things have to get done, but like I am very, very strict on my boundaries when it comes to that.
Mhm.
Because when I am at work, I pour 150% in so that
Mhm.
if I need to sustain that, I need to just leave it there. And, again, of course, like I said, there's those afternoons or those evenings where you have to bring it. There's things that have to get done, but like, I'm never going to be that person that's at the school till 6, 7 p.m. just because I'm cleaning up or whatever. Like, it all gets done within the workday. And
Mhm.
it's something that I've like been really strict on myself because in the beginning, obviously, you say yes to everything. You go over and beyond, which is good, but it's not sustainable. So
Right.
that's what I think. Like I'm a better teacher because I set those limits for
Mhm.
myself, at least. There's some people that don't work that way, which is totally fine. But I just know that like if somebody calls me from work at a certain hour or on a Sunday, like I'm not picking up. like,
Right.
like you can shoot me an email, like, and there's nothing against anybody. I love my school, I love my community, but like I also got to take care of myself and make sure that like I have that time to work on me and continue to provide when the time comes.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's really important, especially when you're juggling family and teaching and trying to have your
Oh
own,
my God.
like side gig or art practice.
Yeah, I mean,
It
like
can it can be a lot.
I think of my mom because she had said like, my mom's an amazing artist, and she had my brother, and then she had me, and then was just like, she grew up influencing us with art and like wanting us to be a
Mhm.
part of it, but she was not making work.
Mm.
And then I'll always ask her like, why didn't she's like, because I had a job to do, I had kids to raise, and like occasionally she would make things here and there, but now since retiring and being the house being childless, she's like, could start a museum at this point, like,
Uh,
which I think is amazing. But I was just like, thank you for doing such a good job at raising us. But it's also was like a learning experience for me is to like, don't go 30 years without making something.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I feel like as hard as it is to manage it all, it's also you're modeling for your kids,
yes.
like showing I hope that I
Yeah.
hope that I'm not just like neglecting my daughter. I'm showing her that that a woman especially can
Mhm.
have a job and still have like a passion that she pursues and still parent.
Yeah. And being a mom is a job. Like people,
Yes,
I don't think
totally.
people give enough credit to that because I'm like, oh my God, I'm in awe of motherhood. And I think
Ugh,
it's an incredible thing. And like, that's why I haven't done it yet, because I'm like, I think that's so important. Like you were just saying, like you're honoring your daughter by honoring yourself.
mhm.
So I think, yeah, totally agree.
Yeah. Thank you.
I give you so much, I give you props.
I'm like, I hope that comes through.
Yeah, for sure. It does. I mean, even like the fact that you're doing
Oh,
this, right? You're taking it a step further. And like, this is incredible because I was listening to a couple other episodes because I was like, oh, let me just get a feel of like what this will be like. And it's been fascinating to like listen to other art teachers because like, we're so in our own little worlds. And
mhm.
like it's nice when you read things what people post online, but it's like hear someone talk about it. And like every single person I've noticed loves this. Like they really love their job. And like you can say
Yes.
that. Not many people can say that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's also just like my bias in who I'm who I'm talking with, but yeah, I mean, I started this totally selfishly, like, I need to not be on this island by myself.
Exactly. No, I love it. I'm very grateful.
Thank you. I have a couple more kind of fun, like, get to know you questions.
Yeah.
One, what are you curious about? Big, broad question.
Yeah. It's like, oh my God, what am I curious about? What am I curious about? My life is rooted in curiosity, I guess. Like if the saying was real and I was a cat, I would have been killed a long time ago. Because I am curious by nature, and not just with art making. In general, I like to push myself to the limits and out of my comfort zone. I kind of thrive outside of my comfort zone, and so I'm curious. One thing I am curious about art making wise is something I've never done. I want to get into more like 3D work.
Yeah.
Who knows? I could crash and burn at it, but I've always been really curious about like whatchamacallit, like vinyl work or like building like toys or like creating like in that kind of realm, which I was always really curious about. I would love to get more into like woodworking. Just like 3D art as a whole is something that's so fun to me, but I feel like it would be really, really fun.
Yeah.
I love to just like build and do stuff like that. So definitely curious about diving into the 3D world a little bit more.
Ooh.
And I'm also curious about what the heck's going to happen next in the world. Everything has kind of been on hold in the sense of like, my curiosity is also very rooted in travel and like experience, things like that. So like, I'm always like, everything has come to this screeching halt. So like, that is actually a really good question to explore. I'm going to end up thinking about this all day. I'm like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so broad. I love, like, what are you curious about? Lots of things.
The origins of the universe? I don't know.
Right. All of it.
Have a total existential crisis right here.
Oh, no. Well, with the 3D work, I feel like, working on your painting, but you're working on these 3D objects already. Yeah. So like maybe there's already sort of a sense that you're using of, how the image is going to work on this sort of object, how it's going to change as it moves, like all of those things. I feel like you're probably already thinking about in your work. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see like what comes next.
That's why I think I've stuck with the shoes. And like, I do enjoy painting on canvas and 2D surfaces, but like, I think that's what it is. I think I enjoy the finishing off of the 3D object of like the decorating of it. But now I kind of want to make the object itself as well.
Oh, yeah.
So that I think would be like a full encompassing like art making process, as opposed to like, buying the shoe is great, but to not even necessarily a shoe, but like making some sort of structure that could also has like a utilitarian purpose and like, I don't know, just kind of run with it from there. I've thought about it. And I have friends who like are literally will like make shoes or can make all these different things with different materials. So I'm like, maybe I can utilize that resource, because I think our best asset is always collaboration. So definitely would like to kind of explore that more for sure.
So cool. I love that. Okay, fun little question. What is your favorite food?
I'm the worst at this question. It's so funny. Like, most people have a favorite food. Like, for starters, anyone who knows me would definitely say something sweet, because I have a horribly addictive sweet tooth. But my favorite food, I love. Well, if you live in LA, you can't deny the perfection that is Mexican food, especially getting like street tacos. So that has definitely become a favorite food since living there. I'm a New Yorker, so I love like pizza and bagels at the end of the day. Like all these horribly unhealthy things. Yeah, so I'm going to go with tacos though.
Nice. It's funny. I tried, I guess it was in December, kind of like taking stock of the podcast, and I made these charts of like people's answers to things. And tacos to this question, I was like, every art teacher loves tacos.
They're delicious.
They are. Who doesn't like? That's probably just across the board. Humans love tacos.
It's a spinoff of that one children's book. Was it Dragons Love Tacos? That's a favorite at our school.
There we go. Then, is there anybody that you would want to give like a thank you or a shout out to?
Ooh. First and foremost, I would definitely shout out my kids at work, because like I said, I did not expect to stay in Los Angeles. It was just one of those like life things. We were like, oh, I'm, at the time 28, let me go live in LA. Let's see what happens. And then I love my kids so much. And I don't say that with lightly, like the word love is definitely all encompassing. So I definitely would always shout out my kids, all close to 600 of them. And it's funny because like I know every single person's name and I know exactly what they need, and it's taken years of practice, but I really, they're what get me up and keep me going. As well as my staff, my faculty at work, and my admin, which is definitely not a normal sentiment, I'm sure. But like we really have a really awesome team. No short, definitely not perfect. We have a lot of work to do, but it's been the most like collectively efficient group I've ever worked with, where I can just completely be myself and we can really get a lot of awesome things done.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, my main shout outs. And then, my mom and my parents.
Yeah.
Art wise, I'm really weird with my taste in art. It really runs the gamut. I'm really attracted to stuff that I can't do, or I don't think I can do, or I wouldn't emulate. So, there's a lot of artists that influence me out there, but yeah, I think my main shout out would be to my kids.
Yeah. I love that. They're such an inspiration for us art teachers.
Oh, for sure. And like one of my favorite things is like how honest they are. I know I have a good relationship with them, but like also like they're not afraid to tell me what's up. Like if they need me to do something differently, or if they want to try something, or if I just straight up messed up, like they're ready to tell me.
Yeah.
which I appreciate that. We need more of that in the world.
Yes, totally. Okay, last thing. Where can listeners connect with you online?
The best way to connect with me online would be through Instagram at SinkerSwimKicks. That's where I do that's where all like my sneaker stuff is. But then also, students, they're not supposed to, but they will correspond with me on there. Just because I do like for them to see the work, right? I don't promote Instagram to my littlest ones, but my middle schoolers, I'm like, I always tell them, I was like, it'd be really unfair for me to tell you to make all this work if I also wasn't making work. So I let them, if you have an account and you want to follow it, go for it. There's nothing inappropriate on there. I'm very strategic about what goes on there and what doesn't, just because I know that I am encouraging them to see what I'm making. But yeah, that would be the best place for anyone to connect with me, would be at SinkerSwimKicks on Instagram.
Awesome. And I will link to that too.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Jill. This was really cool just to hear about all of the things that you're doing.
I appreciate it. This was fun. Thank you. Like I said, I could talk about this stuff all day long, but I never get a chance.
Yes. I know. It feels so freeing to actually have somebody to talk to about it.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it, Rebecca. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for listening. As always, you can reach me at Teaching Artist Podcast on Instagram or teachingartistpodcast@gmail.com. Who do you want to hear from? Please share your recommendations of teaching artists. And if you loved this episode, please subscribe, leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow me. It really makes a big difference. Thank you.